The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with alien voices, each species contributing to the cacophony of dismissive laughter. Ambassador Vextar of the Hegemony leaned back in his crystalline chair, his four eyes gleaming with amusement as he watched the human delegation present their military capabilities. "So these are your primary infantry weapons?" Vextar gestured toward the holographic display showing various Earth rifles. "Chemical propulsion? Metal projectiles? How primitive." Admiral Sarah Chun stood rigid at the presentation podium, her jaw clenched as she endured another round of mockery. The humans had been seeking admission to the Galactic Defense Coalition for 3 years now, only to face constant ridicule about their backwards technology. "The kinetic energy delivery system has proven effective in our conflicts," Chun replied diplomatically, though her hands trembled slightly with suppressed anger. Commander Zeph Los of the Mantis Collective chittered in what passed for laughter among his species. "Effective against what? Primitive beasts? Our plasma rifles can vaporize a target from 10 kilometers away. Your bullets would bounce off our combat armor like pebbles." The massive view screen shifted to display footage from recent coalition battles. Sleek energy weapons carved through enemy formations with elegant precision, while force shields deflected incoming fire in shimmering barriers of light. The contrast with Earth's gunpowder-based arsenal couldn't have been more stark. "Perhaps," suggested the Serpentine Counselor Sisesrath, "the humans could serve in support roles. Logistics, maybe? Their vessels seem adequate for cargo transport." More laughter rippled through the chamber. Admiral Chen's aide, Captain Marcus Rodriguez, stepped forward. "If I may, counselors, our weapons have advantages that might not be immediately apparent. The projectile velocity, the stopping power, the reliability in adverse conditions." "Reliability?" Vextar's translator crackled with synthetic amusement. "Our weapons are powered by miniaturized fusion cores. They never fail, never run out of ammunition, and never miss their target with advanced targeting systems." General Thrakon of the warrior caste slammed his massive fist on his table. "Show them the siege of Kepler, 442, where our forces eliminated an entire rebel stronghold without a single casualty. Your rifles would have taken months to achieve what we accomplished in hours." The holographic display shifted again, showing coalition forces in their gleaming powered armor advancing across alien battlefields. Energy shields absorbed incoming fire while returning precise plasma bolts that turned fortified positions to slag. Their movements were coordinated by AI systems that calculated optimal firing solutions in real time. Admiral Chen watched the display with growing frustration. Earth's soldiers looked like medieval knights compared to these technological marvels. Their body armor was ceramic and Kevlar instead of energy fields. Their communications relied on radio waves instead of quantum entanglement. Their weapons fired chunks of metal instead of coherent energy. "The Coalition faces serious threats," announced Supreme Commander Aelvex, a towering figure whose species had evolved from apex predators. "The Devourers consume entire star systems. The Shadow Fleet appears from nowhere to strike at our colonies. We cannot afford to carry dead weight." "We understand the stakes," Chen replied. "Earth has faced extinction-level threats before. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, global wars. Our species has a proven track record of adaptation and survival." Counselor SSS Ratha's scales shifted color, indicating skepticism. "Survival against natural disasters is different from warfare against advanced civilizations. The Devourers use living ships that regenerate damage faster than your primitive weapons could inflict it." Captain Rodriguez pulled up tactical data on his tablet. "Our analysts have studied the engagement reports. We believe concentrated firepower from multiple rifles could potentially overwhelm regeneration rates through sustained damage accumulation." The chamber erupted in renewed laughter. Even a normally stoic Aelvex allowed what might have been a smile to cross his predatory features. "Concentrated firepower?" Vextar wiped moisture from his eyes with a delicate tendril. "You would need thousands of your soldiers to match a single plasma cannon. The logistics alone would be impossible." Admiral Chun felt the weight of Earth's hopes pressing down on her shoulders. Humanity had spent decades developing faster-than-light travel, had sacrificed enormous resources to reach the stars, only to find themselves hopelessly outclassed by every other species they encountered. The view screen now showed coalition casualty reports. Despite their advanced technology, losses were mounting against the mysterious enemy forces. Plasma rifles, energy shields, and AI targeting systems weren't enough to turn the tide of the galactic war. Perhaps, Admiral Chen said quietly, her voice cutting through the laughter. You're right about our limitations. But sometimes the most primitive solution is the most effective one. We'd like to request a field demonstration. The chamber fell silent for the first time since the presentation began. The coalition proving grounds on Nexus 7 stretched across a barren landscape of rust-colored sand and jagged rock formations. Admiral Chun stood beside the observation platform, watching as Earth's small contingent of soldiers prepared their equipment under the amused gaze of alien military officials. Sergeant First Class Jake Mountain Morrison adjusted the scope on his rifle for the 5th time that morning. The weapon looked ancient compared to the sleek energy weapons carried by coalition forces, but Morrison had carried variants of this design through conflicts across 3 continents back on Earth. Range markers set at 1, 2, and 5 kilometers, announced the range officer, a spider-like arachnoid whose multiple eyes tracked movement with mechanical precision. Standard combat scenarios include moving targets, environmental interference, and armor penetration tests. Commander Seplos Chiteret dus Misibli. 5 kilometers? Our standard engagement range is 15 kilometers with perfect accuracy. This will be over quickly. Morrison ignored the commentary, focusing on his breathing as he settled into position behind his rifle. The weapon was a heavily modified version of Earth's most reliable sniper system, chambered in a high-velocity cartridge that had proven effective against everything from light vehicles to body armor. The first target appeared at 1 kilometer. A holographic enemy soldier wearing standard coalition armor flickered into existence, moving in an unpredictable pattern designed to simulate real combat conditions. Energy weapons from the coalition forces responded instantly, their targeting computers calculating intercept courses and adjusting for movement. Morrison waited. His human eyes tracked the target's movement, noting subtle patterns in its evasion algorithm. While alien weapons fired precise shots that the target's defensive systems could predict and counter, Morrison held his fire. 3 seconds later, he squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the range like thunder. The target's holographic armor flared as the kinetic penetrator punched through its energy shielding, which had been calibrated to absorb directed energy weapons, but wasn't designed for high-velocity projectiles. Lucky shot, muttered Vextar, though his translator carried a note of uncertainty. The range officer's voice crackled over the communication system. Target neutralized. Penetration achieved through standard defensive systems. Initiating 2-kilometer scenario. This time, multiple targets appeared simultaneously, each one equipped with advanced countermeasures. Energy weapons from coalition forces created a dazzling light show as they engaged the holograms, but the target's adaptive shielding began compensating for the attack patterns within seconds. Morrison shifted his position, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to hunt in the mountains of Afghanistan, the jungles of Myanmar, and the urban sprawl of Detroit. His rifle tracked smoothly from target to target, each shot precisely timed to exploit momentary gaps in the defensive systems. The aliens fell silent as target after target fell to Morrison's rifle fire, where energy weapons required sustained beams to overwhelm shielding. Each bullet delivered its full kinetic force in a single devastating impact. The target's defensive AI couldn't adapt to the unpredictable timing of human marksmanship. This is impossible, Commander Zeflos protested. The targeting solutions are too complex for biological processing. You must be using some form of cybernetic enhancement. Admiral Chun smiled thinly. Sergeant Morrison, please submit to a full biometric scan. The scan results appeared on the observation platform's display screen within minutes. Morrison was entirely biological, with no cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications, and no technological enhancements beyond his rifle scope. General Thrakhan leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the display. How was this possible? Our warriors trained for decades with the finest targeting systems in the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez, who had been quietly monitoring the demonstration, stepped forward. Sergeant Morrison grew up hunting deer in the Rocky Mountains with his grandfather. He learned to account for wind speed, temperature variations, target movement, and elevation changes using nothing but his eyes and instincts. No computer can replicate that kind of environmental integration. The 5-kilometer target scenario activated without warning. The holographic enemies appeared at extreme range, barely visible even through the observation platform's enhanced optics. Coalition energy weapons struggled to maintain coherent beams at such distances, their effectiveness degrading significantly. Morrison made minute adjustments to his scope, compensating for the planet's atmospheric density and gravitational field. He had spent the previous night studying weather reports and calculating ballistic coefficients by hand, using mathematical principles that his grandfather had taught him decades ago. The first shot rang out across the range. 5 seconds later, the distant target flickered and vanished as the projectile found its mark. Counselor SS Rath's scales shifted through several color patterns, indicating confusion and surprise. The projectile velocity at that range should be insufficient for armor penetration. Morrison looked up from his rifle, meeting the serpentine alien's gaze. "Ma'am, that round was traveling at over 3,000 feet per second when it hit. Physics doesn't care about advanced technology." The demonstration concluded with Morrison engaging targets in adverse conditions. Sandstorms that disrupted energy weapon targeting systems had minimal effect on ballistic trajectories. Electronic interference that scrambled AI targeting computers couldn't interfere with human intuition and experience. As the dust settled over the proving grounds, Admiral Chun addressed the silent assembly of alien military officials. "Gentlemen, I believe we've demonstrated that our primitive weapons have certain advantages that your advanced technology cannot replicate." Supreme Commander A.L. Vex stepped forward, his predatory features thoughtful. "One skill marksman does not constitute a military force, Admiral. Wars are won by armies, not individuals." Morrison began disassembling his rifle with practiced efficiency. "Sir, with respect, I'm not the only one. Earth has about 50,000 soldiers with similar training, and we're just getting started." The silence that followed was deafening. The emergency council session was called after the coalition's worst defeat in 50 years. The massive holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the aftermath of the Battle of Centauri Station, where an entire coalition fleet had been decimated by Shadow Fleet forces. Supreme Commander A.L. Vex's voice carried undertones of barely controlled rage. 17 heavy cruisers destroyed. 4,000 of our finest warriors dead. Their cloaking technology made our targeting systems useless. Admiral Chun and her human delegation sat in the corner of the chamber, no longer the objects of mockery they had been just weeks earlier. The successful demonstration on Nexus 7 had earned them observer status, but full coalition membership remained elusive. "The Shadow Fleet's adaptive shielding neutralizes our plasma weapons after the first few hits," reported General Thrakon. "Their vessels learn our firing patterns and compensate within seconds. Our most advanced targeting computers cannot achieve meaningful penetration." Vexstar's crystalline features reflected the chamber's emergency lighting. "We have lost 3 core worlds in the past month. At this rate, the coalition will cease to exist within a year." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward in his seat, studying the tactical data streaming across his tablet. The Shadow Fleet's vessels were unlike anything in coalition records. They appeared to be partially organic, capable of rapid adaptation and self-repair. Most disturbing was their ability to anticipate and counter coalition tactics with supernatural precision. "If I may," Admiral Chen spoke up, breaking the heavy silence. "Our analysis suggests that your enemy's advantage lies in their ability to predict and adapt to your standardized attack patterns. Energy weapons follow predictable trajectories and frequencies." Commander Zephlos's mandibles clicked irritably. "Our weapons are the result of 10,000 years of technological development. They represent the pinnacle of military science." Morrison, who had been invited to observe the proceedings, cleared his throat. "Sir, sometimes the best technology is the one your enemy doesn't expect. Our rifles fire projectiles that follow ballistic trajectories. No computer can predict exactly where human marksmen will aim." The chamber's attention focused on the human contingent with new interest. Counselor SS Rath's scales shifted to thoughtful patterns. You believe your primitive weapons could be effective against the Shadow Fleet. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. We'd like to propose a joint operation, a small task force combining coalition vessels with human sharpshooters. If we can get close enough to their ships, our rifles might be able to target critical systems that your energy weapons can't penetrate. The laughter that would have greeted such a suggestion weeks earlier was notably absent. The coalition had tried everything else, and desperation was beginning to set in. Supreme Commander A.L. Vex studied the tactical displays for several long minutes. The Shadow Fleet vessels have armor plating that our heaviest plasma cannons cannot breach. What makes you think small arms fire would be more effective? Morrison stood and walked to the central display. Sir, armor designed to deflect energy weapons isn't necessarily effective against kinetic penetrators. Our anti-material rifles fire rounds designed to punch through tank armor. If we can identify weak points in their hull design. General Thrakhun's predatory instincts were clearly engaged. You would need to be extremely close to their vessels to achieve accurate fire. The risks would be enormous. Captain Rodriguez pulled up schematics of coalition assault shuttles. We've been developing modifications to your boarding craft. Stealth systems to get us close, reinforced hulls to survive the approach, and magnetic anchoring systems to maintain stable firing positions. The council chamber fell silent again as the aliens processed this information. The idea of humans floating in space, firing primitive rifles at technologically superior starships, seemed almost absurd. Yet their conventional tactics had failed catastrophically. Vextar's translator crackled softly. The Shadow Fleet's next target appears to be the Vegas system. Our intelligence suggests they will arrive within 72 hours. It would be an ideal testing ground for your unconventional approach. Admiral Chun felt her heart rate increase. This was the opportunity humanity had been waiting for, but the stakes couldn't be higher. Failure would likely mean the end of Earth's hopes for coalition membership, and possibly the destruction of human space presence entirely. Morrison was already calculating ranges and angles in his head. We'll need detailed scans of Shadow Fleet vessel architecture, atmospheric composition around their ships, and gravitational field variations. Our targeting solutions depend on understanding the environment. The alien military officials exchanged glances laden with uncertainty and desperation. They had exhausted their conventional options and faced annihilation if the current trend continued. Supreme Commander A.L. Vex finally spoke. Very well. You will have access to our intelligence archives and technical specifications for the modified assault shuttles. But understand this, Admiral Chun. If your plan fails, it may be the last opportunity any of us have to stop the Shadow Fleet. As the emergency session concluded, Morrison found himself surrounded by alien officers asking technical questions about human marksmanship capabilities. For the first time since arriving in Coalition space, he felt like his skills were being taken seriously. Admiral Chun watched the exchange with mixed emotions. Earth soldiers were about to face their greatest challenge, using weapons that their enemies would consider laughably primitive. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's best hope for survival in space warfare lay in techniques developed by hunters and soldiers on distant mountains and battlefields back home. The next 72 hours would determine whether Earth's rifles were truly weak, or whether the galaxy had simply underestimated the power of human determination combined with kinetic energy. The modified Coalition assault shuttle drifted silently through the debris field surrounding Vega Station, its stealth systems engaged, and its human passengers preparing for the most unusual military operation in galactic history. Morrison checked his rifle for the 10th time, running through pre-combat rituals that his grandfather had taught him in the mountains of Colorado. Shadow Fleet vessels detected at bearing 27 Mark IV, whispered Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the shuttle's pilot and one of Earth's most experienced combat veterans. 3 heavy cruisers, just like intelligence predicted. Morrison peered through the shuttle's reinforced viewport at their targets. The Shadow Fleet ships were unlike anything he had ever imagined. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, dark surfaces that absorbed light and reflected Coalition sensor sweeps. Energy weapons from defending Coalition forces struck their hulls and simply vanished, absorbed by some unknown technology. Beside him, Corporal David Chun checked his modified anti-material rifle, a weapon that could punch through 12 inches of steel armor at maximum range. Never thought I'd be shooting at spaceships with a rifle my great-grandfather would recognize. The shuttle's communications system crackled with reports from the main battle. Coalition forces were fighting desperately to prevent the Shadow Fleet from reaching Vega Prime, but their energy weapons were proving ineffective against the alien vessel's adaptive defenses. Coalition command to Hunter Team came Admiral Chen's voice over the encrypted channel. You are authorized to begin the approach. All Coalition forces have been ordered to maintain distance from the target zone. Morrison felt the familiar calm that came over him before a difficult shot. His breathing slowed, and his heart rate decreased as he entered the focus state that had made him one of Earth's most effective snipers. Copy command. Beginning final approach. Lieutenant Kim engaged the magnetic anchoring system as the shuttle closed to within 500 meters of the nearest Shadow Fleet cruiser. The alien vessel's hull pulsed with organic rhythms, and Morrison could see what appeared to be weapon ports opening and closing like breathing orifices. Target analysis complete, reported Specialist James Park, whose job was to identify critical systems on the alien ships. Sensor clusters at grid reference Alpha 7 and Charlie 9. Well, it's like a power coupling at Delta 12. And there's something that might be a command module at Echo 3. Morrison studied the targets through his scope, noting how the ship's surface seemed to anticipate incoming energy weapons and shift its defensive characteristics accordingly. But the alien technology had never encountered kinetic projectiles fired by human marksmen who could adjust their aim based on instinct and experience. Range is 420 meters, Morrison reported. Wind is negligible in vacuum, but I'm reading gravitational anomalies around the target vessel. Adjusting for deflection. He lined up his first shot on the sensor cluster, a crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. The Shadow Fleet ship was moving slowly, following a predictable course as it approached the Coalition defensive line. Morrison's scope tracked smoothly, calculating lead time and trajectory. The rifle kicked against his shoulder with familiar authority. Through the vacuum of space, he watched as the .50 caliber tungsten core round struck the alien sensor array with devastating effect. Unlike energy weapons that the ship could absorb and dissipate, the kinetic impact shattered the crystalline structure completely. Immediately, the Shadow Fleet vessel's movement became erratic. Its smooth approach vector turned into a wobbling path as its navigation systems struggled to compensate for the damaged sensors. Direct hit on target Alpha 7, Morrison reported, already shifting to his next target. Enemy vessel is showing signs of navigation disruption. Corporal Chun fired at the power coupling, his round punching through what appeared to be organic armor plating to strike vital systems beneath. Sparks and strange fluids began venting from the impact point, and the ship's defensive energy fields flickered unstably. The Shadow Fleet vessel began to respond to the unexpected attack. Weapon ports across its hull opened, and energy beams swept the area, searching for the source of the damage. But the assault shuttle stealth systems and small size made it nearly invisible to sensors designed to track much larger Coalition warships. Morrison's third shot targeted the command module, a dome-like structure covered in sensory apparatus that seemed to serve as the ship's nerve center. The tungsten penetrator punched through the alien material with enough kinetic energy to devastate the delicate electronics within. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Shadow Fleet cruiser's coordinated movements ceased, its weapon fire became wild and unfocused, and its adaptive shielding began fluctuating randomly. For the first time in months of warfare, a Shadow Fleet vessel appeared to be genuinely disabled. "Holy shit," whispered Lieutenant Kim as she watched the alien ship begin listing to one side. "It's actually working." The other Shadow Fleet vessels immediately began converging on their damaged companion, their own sensors trying to identify the source of the attack. Morrison and his team quickly shifted their attention to the second cruiser, which was moving to investigate the area around the first. This time, the aliens were ready for energy weapon attacks from Coalition forces, but they had no countermeasures for rifle fire from human snipers. Morrison's shots targeted critical junction points between the ship's organic armor sections, finding weak spots that energy weapons couldn't exploit. Corporal Chun focused on what appeared to be sensory organs distributed across the vessel's hull, each shot eliminating another node in the ship's perception network. Specialist Park had identified what looked like atmospheric vents, and his precision fire began disrupting the ship's life support systems. The second Shadow Fleet cruiser began to suffer cascade failures as its biological systems struggled to compensate for the kinetic damage. Unlike energy weapon impacts that could be absorbed and distributed, rifle rounds created permanent physical damage that the ships couldn't heal or adapt around. Coalition forces watching the engagement from a safe distance couldn't believe what they were seeing. Ships that had seemed invincible against the galaxy's most advanced weapons were being crippled by what appeared to be primitive firearms operated by humans in a tiny assault shuttle. Morrison lined up his most difficult shot yet, targeting the third Shadow Fleet vessel at maximum range. The ship was moving evasively now, its commanders apparently beginning to understand that they faced a new type of threat. But human marksmanship had evolved through millions of years of hunting moving prey, and Morrison had spent decades perfecting his skills against targets that didn't want to be hit. The shot traveled nearly 600 meters before striking a critical power relay that Specialist Park had identified through careful observation. The impact triggered a chain reaction that rippled through the alien vessel's energy distribution network, leaving entire sections of the ship dark and powerless. As the third Shadow Fleet cruiser began to drift helplessly, the two damaged vessels suddenly executed a coordinated retreat, their faster-than-light drives engaging simultaneously. For the first time in the war, Shadow Fleet forces had withdrawn from a battlefield. The silence on the communication channels lasted for several seconds before Admiral Chen's voice cut through the static. "Hunter team, please confirm your status. Did you just force a Shadow Fleet retreat?" Morrison ejected the spent cartridge from his rifle and watched it tumble away into space, a small piece of Earth-manufactured metal joining the debris field around Vega Station. "Confirmed, Command. Targets neutralized, and remaining enemy forces have withdrawn. Mission accomplished." 6 months after the Battle of Vega Station, the Galactic Council Chamber had been transformed. Where once alien delegates had laughed at human military capabilities, now they studied tactical reports with intense concentration. The walls displayed battle footage from a dozen worlds where human sniper teams had turned the tide against Shadow Fleet invasions. Admiral Chun stood before the assembly, but this time her presentation focused on integration protocols rather than proving human worth. Earth had gone from petitioning for coalition membership to having their tactical expertise desperately sought across the galaxy. The Kepler 442 operation demonstrates the effectiveness of combined arms tactics, Chen explained, gesturing toward holographic displays showing human snipers working alongside coalition forces. While energy weapons suppress enemy formations and draw their attention, human marksmen eliminate critical systems with precision kinetic strikes. Supreme Commander A.L. Vex nodded approvingly. His species had quickly adapted their combat doctrine to incorporate human capabilities, and the results had been remarkable. The Shadow Fleet's adaptive technology appears to be specifically designed to counter energy-based weapons. They have no effective countermeasures for kinetic projectiles delivered by human marksmanship. Morrison, now bearing the insignia of a coalition tactical advisor, stepped forward to address the assembly. His reputation had spread throughout coalition space, and alien commanders specifically requested his presence at crucial battles. "The key to our success isn't just the rifles," Morrison explained, his voice carrying new confidence. "It's the human ability to improvise and adapt in real time. Our marksmen don't rely on targeting computers or predictable algorithms. Each shot is calculated using instincts developed over thousands of years of evolution." The view screen shifted to show recent engagement statistics. Shadow Fleet forces that had once seemed unstoppable were now suffering regular defeats. Their vessels had begun avoiding sectors where human sniper teams were deployed, fundamentally altering their invasion strategies. Counselor SS Isratha's scales displayed patterns of amazement. "In 6 months, humanity has achieved what our combined fleets could not accomplish in years of warfare. The psychological impact alone has been devastating to enemy morale." Commander Zephylos, who had initially dismissed human capabilities, now served as liaison officer for joint operations. "Our warrior castes are requesting cross-training with human marksmen. They wish to learn techniques that cannot be programmed into targeting systems. Vextar accessed his data cores with rapid tendril movements. Coalition casualties have decreased by 60% in sectors where human teams are deployed. Enemy retreat rates have increased by 200%. These statistics represent the greatest tactical advancement in coalition military history. Admiral Chun felt a surge of pride watching alien commanders praise human capabilities that had been mocked just months earlier. But the war was far from over, and new challenges were emerging as both the Shadow Fleet and the mysterious Devourers adapted their tactics. Intelligence reports suggest that enemy forces are developing countermeasures. General Thrakon announced, his massive frame casting familiar shadows across the tactical displays. Thicker armor, kinetic shielding systems, and erratic movement patterns designed to complicate human targeting solutions. Morrison smiled grimly. Sir, humans have been adapting to changing conditions since we started hunting mammoth with stone spears. If they want an arms race, we'll give them one they won't expect. The Chamber's attention focused on Morrison as he outlined humanity's latest developments. Earth's military-industrial complex had shifted into high gear, producing weapons specifically designed for space combat. New ammunition types, improved optics, and enhanced rifle platforms were already being field-tested. The Mark VII anti-material rifle fires programmable projectiles that can adjust their trajectory mid-flight, Morrison explained. Our new armor-piercing rounds use depleted uranium cores with tungsten penetrators. And we're developing specialized ammunition for different enemy vessel types. Captain Rodriguez presented intelligence gathered from captured Shadow Fleet technology. Their adaptive systems work by analyzing incoming energy signatures and developing appropriate countermeasures. But kinetic projectiles don't have energy signatures. They're just mass moving at high velocity, and physics doesn't negotiate. Lieutenant Kim, now commanding a full squadron of modified assault shuttles, added tactical insights from recent operations. We've learned that enemy vessels have critical vulnerabilities that their designers never considered. Organic components that can't be armored without compromising function, junction points that must remain accessible, and sensory systems that require direct exposure to space. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent priority alert. The Chamber's main display activated automatically, showing a coalition fleet in desperate combat against a massive Devourer mothership. The living vessel was consuming smaller coalition ships, incorporating their materials into its own growing mass. Supreme Commander AAL Vex received tactical updates through his neural interface. The Devourer is immune to energy weapons. Its living hull absorbs plasma and uses the energy to accelerate its growth. Request immediate deployment of human marksman teams. Admiral Chun was already activating emergency protocols. Morrison, how quickly can you get a team to the Rigel system? Morrison checked his tactical computer, calculating travel times and deployment options. 48 hours if we use the new jump-capable shuttles. But, sir, we've never engaged a Devourer before. We'll need real-time intelligence on their vulnerabilities. The view screen showed the massive enemy vessel continuing to grow as it consumed coalition ships. Its surface writhed with organic activity, sprouting new weapon clusters and sensory organs as it incorporated capture technology. Specialist Park, who had become Earth's leading expert on alien vessel analysis, studied the incoming data feeds. The growth patterns suggest vulnerable points where new tissue connects to the main body. If we can target those junction areas during active consumption phases. Counselor SSS Rath's scales shifted to urgent warning patterns. The Devourer will reach the Rigel colonies within 72 hours if it isn't stopped. 3 billion civilians are depending on our success. Morrison stood and gathered his equipment, the familiar weight of his rifle providing comfort in the face of this new challenge. Around him, the Galactic Council that had once dismissed human capabilities now looked to Earth soldiers as their best hope for survival. Understood, sir, Morrison replied, checking his ammunition supplies. We'll stop it. As the human team prepared for deployment, Admiral Chun addressed the assembled aliens one final time. 6 months ago, you questioned whether Earth's rifles were too weak for galactic warfare. I think we've answered that question. The chamber erupted in what passed for applause among the various alien species. Where once there had been mockery and dismissal, now there was respect and hope. Morrison headed for the shuttle bay, knowing that the mountains of Earth had prepared him for challenges he never could have imagined. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but human determination combined with kinetic energy was proving to be a force that even advanced alien civilizations couldn't overcome. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the conflict began, the coalition had reasons for optimism.